There's so many people who are going to be remembered for how they died because they overdosed, and I want to be remembered for how I lived. My name is Shannon Lundeen, born and raised in Charlestown, Massachusetts. Raised by a very strong single mother. My grandparents came over from Ireland when they were about 18. Single mother of 2 young girls. Very involved in my church. That's what really makes me happy. So I feel like growing up in Charlestown, especially in the era that I grew up in, you kind of had to have this kill or be killed attitude, and you were taught like what happens at home stays at home, and you didn't show weakness on the street. But I had my first drink at the age of 12. I thought that like this was just like a phase, and it was like part of growing up, and it was something that all the kids did. And then it definitely progressed to, you know, like marijuana, and then like pills such as like Klonopin, Valium, that type of stuff. You know, again, all through the years, I still thought that it was just like a part of growing up, and, you know, everybody tried alcohol, everybody tried marijuana, everybody tried cocaine, and that I would grow out of it. I didn't think that I would become addicted. And, you know, I did Oxycontins, you know, here and there. Like I said, it wasn't my drug of choice at first. And then I started to really get into them more regularly, and then I realized that I could have cared less about doing any other drug because I really liked the way that this had made me feel. Sniffing Oxycontin, you're sniffing heroin, I'm not as bad as you. Or I'm sniffing heroin, you're shooting heroin, I'm not as bad as you. And I think every drug addict says that they'll never use a needle. I could be wrong, but I know that I said that. I said I would never do heroin, and I did. And it was definitely heroin that brought me to my knees, and I turned to heroin because it was cheaper and more potent. I mean, I always knew that it was dangerous. I just really thought that I was unique or invincible, and you know, I thought I wouldn't let it get to a point that it did. But then again, I said that about every other substance I was using. I had been in and out of various detoxes. I never went on to further care until the very end of my running. And so what had happened is I had gotten a letter in the mail from DCF saying that they were going to come and pay a visit because they were concerned about my daughter Lainey, who was about 4 or 5 at the time. And then the day that the DCF worker had come out, she was sitting at the table with my mother and I was badgering her about who called on me. That's all I cared about. I wasn't thinking about what could potentially happen. And my mom slammed her hands on the table and said, I called on you. And so my mom took temporary guardianship of my daughter, and I wasn't allowed near her unless I was doing everything I was supposed to do. And, you know, that was really difficult to do at first. I really thought that when I got out, like, I would never ever pick up a drug again. I didn't want to ever come back here. And I really believed it at that moment, but the second my feet hit the pavement, that changed. And my plan was to get the PO off my back, get DCF off my back, and get my mother off my back, and probably go back to doing what I was doing. You know, I started to learn about myself and about my addiction and why I did the things that I did. But what happened one day is someone had said to me, Shannon, would you die for your daughter? And I said, oh, of course I would. And then they said to me, well, why don't you live for her? And that really struck me. Then I started to accept that, and I would be able to live a life of recovery.
Do you worry about relapsing, even after all these years?
No, because it's not an option. Relapse is not an option. I probably just went through one of the worst things I have ever gone through in my recovery. The father of my children overdosed and died a couple weeks ago. His backpack got sent to me with his stuff in it, and inside of his backpack I found 2 40s of black tar heroin. And that was one of the most vulnerable places I've ever been in my life. For me, like, you know, I want to go back to school. I want to get a degree. Like, I have all these goals and these dreams. I want to open up a recovery support center right across the street, like a drop-in where we can have people just come in, and if they need to make calls to get into detox, they can do that. If they need to do a resume, they can do that. If they need to fill out a job application or figure out how to go walk across the street and get an ID. It's like little things like that. That's my dream, and that's going to happen.